So a few days before CES, we were actually visited by our friends NZXT, and they dropped off the N7 motherboard, which I'm kind of glad I didn't do a review right away, because there's been a lot of, I don't want to say development, but there's been a lot of discussion about this motherboard. It was obviously very, very ambitious for a company that's known for making cases and all-in-one water cooling units to jump into the hardware space. This has actually been a somewhat controversial piece of product. Like I said, I'm kind of glad I waited to do a review on this because some things have changed, and we're going to kind of talk about this. We're going to see whether or not this was really a good idea.
Do you want to be cooler? Do you want to be more desirable? Well, you're in luck because right now you can own your very own JayzTwoCents swag and immediately be the cool kid on the block. Max out your sex appeal by following the link down below.
I'll be honest, I kind of hate doing motherboard reviews. They're boring. They are the unsung hero of your computer. The GPU gets all the gaming glory and the CPU gets all of the hype. And other than that, your motherboard doesn't really get that much attention. I mean, if you're overclocking, obviously it's an important part of your system. And the only time it even gets noticed is when it fails, and then everyone loves to curse the motherboard manufacturers. But we'll kind of circle back to that. Here's your motherboard. Obviously, this is a white version. Set that aside for now. SLI bridge, some long screws. We've got some LED strips right here because unfortunately, the lighting control on this specifically requires NZXT cam, which that's kind of a love-hate. I did a video on cam. Many of you didn't like it. There has been some improvements to it for sure. I just kind of want to see the layout here. These look like just standard RGB strips though. But this is where you learn that it is proprietary because it has got not just your standard. See, most of the time RGB plugs terminate like this. That way you can just plug this directly into your motherboard. These on the other hand terminate to a keyed plug, which is pretty much NZXT cam only, which, like I said, it's unfortunate. I don't like when companies force you to use their software. Like you have to use cam to use functions on this motherboard. It says so right on the box though, so I guess, you know, whatever. So here's the motherboard itself. I do believe they have a black and a white version. White is obviously the one that we got here. And in terms of just build quality, I mean, it feels sturdy. It's not the thickest PCB I've ever taken a look at. You can see this is a white motherboard right here. It's almost got a bit of an eggshell color to it. It's not like a pure white, it's more of an eggshell. Even has a texture to it. We've got a kind of a ghosted NZXT logo right here. We've got a heatsink. Looks like a pretty beefy heatsink. Now, in terms of the OEM for this is an ECS motherboard, which has kind of been conversation point number 2 on this, is the fact that ECS is not known for being the most high-end motherboard manufacturer, but they did say in a press release that the motherboard manufacturer built this to spec with NZXT. It is not a rebrand of another motherboard. It was built from the ground up in collaboration with NZXT. So there is that. This is of course an 8th gen socket, so we are gonna be running our 8700K in here to test. Now, a couple of things I'm not a fan of. One, we've handled this already, so it's starting to look a little dirty right here. Try not to have dirty hands, but hey. Lift here to release. This is where your M.2 drives go. So if you're not using M.2, then that stays on top. But what I don't like is, you see how I just uncovered that and now you can see the little Q code readout? I don't understand why they would cover that. Why would you cover that if it's something that you could still use when you don't have an M.2 drive in there? Put that visible somewhere down here. Again, dirty. I need to clean this thing. Man, you handle this a little bit and it starts to get just dirty. But anyway, there's also another cover right here. I'd open it from this side. These are not necessarily the easiest covers to get off. There we go. There's nothing under that one. So I think that's just more for symmetry. But as you can see, there's literally nothing under that one. So I thought that was an M.2 under there. No, I was wrong. Now the long screws that are in the bag right here, these are specifically for you to be able to mount down your motherboard. Because you've got this bit of an armor on here, you can't actually get the screws down in there too easily. So these are designed to go in there like that. And then you just use your Phillips head screwdriver to tighten them down. You got some short ones for it's a little shorter over here. You got the longer ones for it's higher over there. So it's nice that they include that. You just really gotta hope that whatever case you're using, you actually use that thread, because there are a couple of there's 2 different thread sizes that standoffs tend to use. So fingers crossed on that one. In terms of the cover, there's one other thing I wanna kind of point out that I'm not a fan of. It's this cover right here for the chipset. That's the heatsink, which we've now covered up with this very lightly perforated piece of metal. And why we would want to suddenly just create a situation where we could be overheating our chipset is beyond me. So yeah, I guess if you're gonna care about your system, you're gonna want that off. We got our USB 3.0, 4 SATA ports, our 24 pin. We have 1 fan, no, it's not a fan header, that's the RGB header. We got another RGB header right here. Again, they have to use their cable. And then we've got AIO pump, CPU fan, system fan, system fan, system fan, ATX power. And on the bottom here, we've got our front audio connector, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 USBs, another USB 3.0, and tons of fan headers, lots of fan headers, so kudo on that. But we got a water pump header, another system fan, system fan, system fan. All right, so we've got another lift to release right here, and this is where our other M.2 is, right there, which goes above the top GPU, right next to our 4X PCIe. So before we plug this into the test bench, a couple things worth noting. I'm not sure exactly what the power delivery system on this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 chokes on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 capacitors right here next to the VRM. So it seems beefy, but again, it's one of those things where it's time is gonna tell in terms of how well it holds up. But a couple other things worth pointing out on the motherboard surface itself. We do have surface mounted power and reset buttons. This is nice, especially since we're gonna use it on our test bench. That way I'm not having to jumper pins together. Now on the back of the motherboard, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 USB 3.0s. I'm counting 4 USB 2.0s, a BIOS or CMOS clear switch. This is nice. I love seeing this because when you're doing a lot of overclocking, you need to reset that CMOS quickly. There's no reason this shouldn't be on every motherboard as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I'm a bit of an elitist, so whatever. We've also got our Ethernet port on here, HDMI, and a display port, which is nice for Intel's internal, Iris graphics. It's good for troubleshooting bad graphics cards and things. We've got our SPDIF. Yeah, it's such a funny acronym, right? SPDIF, that is our optical output right there. And then we've got our 7-point surround built in. So anyway, looks like I missed a USB port. We got one right there as well. So we've got plenty of USB connectivity on this. Would like to have seen more USB 3.0. But before we can draw our final conclusions, we have to get this set up on the test bench to see how well the BIOS is constructed. BIOS can make or break a motherboard, especially if the UEFI BIOS is terrible. Let's go ahead and set it up and see how well it is. So this is what the motherboard looks like when you actually remove the shell. It just has these little pressure clips that push in there. Just be careful when you go to take it off though, because yeah, I stabbed the shit out of myself on one of the solder points like I was talking about earlier when I grabbed it from the bottom of the board, split my finger, and then I proceeded to bleed all over everything. So we've cleaned that up. Fortunately, we didn't get any on the white part of the motherboard, but there is a piece of me on this motherboard forever now. I do think that's blood right there. Can't get it to come off. Oh well, that's fine. We don't need to zoom in on my blood. Let's just say blood sacrifice has been overpaid. And anyway, this just pops off. So it does make it kind of neat though that you could mod this, right? You could paint it, do something custom with it. Same that this one unscrews, but underneath it's just a basic looking motherboard. There's really nothing all that special about it. I mean, it just looks like any regular old black motherboard. The real reason why I took this off though, is I couldn't actually mount it down on this test bench because it's got studs that stick up with these aluminum nuts. And because this has that long screw like I showed you, like it would go in a standard case with standoffs, I couldn't actually mount this down. But since I popped that off, now we can actually do that and we can just snap it back down. Unfortunately, Nick, that means now I have to pop this off again to actually take it off the motherboard or the test bench. Potentially, oh, see there's blood right there. There was blood right there. The blood, see it's bleeding through the Band-Aid. I cut myself pretty good. Oh, the blood right there too. Now you guys know what I go through for these videos. Nick has remedied the problem. So it actually looks pretty good on here because it's a white and black test bench with a white and black motherboard. It looks pretty awesome, but we're gonna go ahead and do its first boot. And powered on, it's always a good sign. All right, so here's the BIOS. Whoa, it's interesting looking. It definitely looks a lot like sort of like CAM Okay, so we got our water pump RPM set up right there. That is correct, because I do have my pump wire set up to the pump down here. This is my RPM wire for the pump. So it is seeing the pump, which is good. CPU temperature is at 23, system temperature at 20. So we've got these one-click settings here for different performance values and stuff. So if we go over here to our main CPU, hyperthreading, so we got all the settings we would expect here, hyperthreading, active cores, virtualization technology, we'll turn that off because we're gonna try and overclock this. C states, enhanced C1. Where is our overclock settings? Turbo boost. Ah, here we go. So we have to go to CPU and RAM, not advanced. CPU and RAM is where we can do our overclocks. And you can see these are the individual core ratios right there. So let's just set this to like 48. You gotta do it all individually, huh? So instead of just being able to lock all the cores together, it looks like we have to do this individually. Voltage settings, okay, so that's easily identifiable. So we'll make that like, oh geez. So this like reminds me of the old legacy BIOS where you had to actually select from like a drop down. Well, you can only adjust these by 50 millivolts at a time. So we'll do, I guess 1.3. Let's see if it even boots up. These are settings that I know worked on my Asus board. So I guess we'll see if that works. Still booting, numbers are still going. There we go, now we got video. CMOS settings wrong. What do you mean CMOS settings wrong? What does this mean? CMOS settings wrong. Doesn't look like it saved any of our overclock settings either. So a couple things I'm noticing here with the BIOS is the very same settings I run on my Strix board right here. This is the Z370-E Strix from Asus. We've been running this on the test bench ever since we got our 8700K. And we were running 3200 actually on the Strix board. 2933 won't boot, 2667, I don't know, I guess we'll find out right now. It's frustrating because, I mean, this is a very easy CPU to overclock, and the memory is pretty simple. Things I'm setting here are not staying, which is frustrating. There's a 1.3. And Encore, we don't need to worry about Encore right now. So I'm just gonna try saving that. Let's see. Because what happens is it turns off like it's supposed to, it's readjusting its voltages, and it turns on, tries to boot, and it turns off and reboots again. So it doesn't seem to be having luck overclocking the memory like I wanted to. Remember, 3000 megahertz or the XMP profile is indeed an overclock. 2133 is the base clock on this memory. And that's how we went to Windows. So it's a little bit more picky. I think we're gonna need to see some BIOS maturity on this. Again, I don't have a lot of experience with ECS. A lot of people seem to think that ECS is a terrible brand. Again, I don't know. I've not dealt with ECS enough. But in terms of value though, I really have a hard time swallowing $249 for this board. $299 was absolutely outrageous. $249, I think a lot of people still feel is outrageous, but it says something that the company listened to the crowd and reduced its price. I just don't think they reduced it enough. I don't think they can reduce it more because they probably are not getting any profit in this as it is at $249. The motherboard manufacturers have had a long-lasting relationship with the OEMs and been able to get the price down to get the value up for their motherboards, get the prices where they need to be for the public. They can still make money. New companies like NZXT getting into the scene aren't getting that kind of, we'll call it discount, or that manufacturing rate, which is why the price has to stay up. So that's why something like the Strix board makes a whole lot more sense, because you can get this one for $199 and it has built-in wireless. Sure, it has less USBs. I would like to have seen more USB 3.0s on this board, but it has built-in wireless, which we have to use a dongle right here. This is an $80 dongle for our 5G to get our full fiber network going wirelessly. But you know what though? Honestly, at the end of the day, this is just sort of a quick overview of the motherboard showing that, hey, it works. But you guys as buyers, you guys are the ones that the company needs to listen to, not me. And sound off in the comments below what you guys feel about this. I know I'm not the first YouTuber to do this. I mean, like 4th or 5th in the list to actually do reviews of this. But you guys tell us what you think. I'm curious. I don't think I would personally spend $250 on this motherboard as it sits right now. But anyway, time to go guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.